Heading overseas now on a huge week for Australian-US relations with a state dinner held in Washington for Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Joining me live is Dr. Niambi, Associate Professor in the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland. Doctor, a very good morning our time. This was a hugely important meeting, not only for our country, but the United States as well.
Absolutely. I think this was, of course, a scaled down meeting given the international scene, but certainly it was a meeting that had been delayed. But I think President Biden has indicated for some time that he wanted to deepen relationships with Australia. So this state visit was one step toward that.
And it's a big step when there is a state dinner, isn't there? It's quite different to just a pop-in visit.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of orchestration. There's a lot of consideration for entertainment, for the food. All of that is part of this, as much as the guest list, right? Who gets to be selected to participate in this dinner. So it is a very big production, an official production.
And from the United States perspective, we always talk from an Australian perspective about how important our relationship is. What about when we switch the lens and look back from the US looking on Australia?
Well, look, I think Australia has always been an important ally, if you will, for the United States. And I think when you talk about issues like immigration, I think the countries have learned a lot from each other in terms of how to manage it. I think there are questions about how good that has worked, but certainly I do think of the U.S. sees Australia as a peer nation. And so thinking about anything from social welfare to immigration and other kinds of policies, I do think the U.S. sees in Australia a partner and perhaps even a prototype of ways to be an innovator in some of the ways that the United States is trying to address its current circumstances, both domestically and internationally.
Well, there's been quite a drama in and around the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, finally elected.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think this was an interesting 20 plus days. I don't know that this would have been a good time or there will be any good time to make a move like this. It certainly set a precedent because we'd never had this happen before. But with all that was happening internationally with Israel and Gaza, what's been happening with the U.S. and Syria, I mean, it could not have come at a more inopportune time. Not to mention there's a looming shutdown of the federal government as the United States has only stayed open, the government has only stayed open for another 45 days because of a continuing resolution. So there's a lot on the table here. So finally, there's a speaker and the House can get back to conducting business.
What do we know of him, Mike Johnson?
Mike Johnson is a very conservative Republican. He was one of the folks who was not keen on certifying the election, and I think that's putting it very mildly. He has sort of gotten, I guess, the coronation by former President Trump. And it is yet to be seen how he will govern now that he has the gavel. I mean, it's easy to sort of throw darts and say what you would do if you were in that position, but you don't just have to keep your caucus happy. You have this sort of more strident conservative wing of the Republican Party that has sort of been throwing Molotov cocktails at the caucus. And it has caused some real strife within the body. I mean, as we've seen, potential speaker after potential speaker either failing to get votes or dropping out. So I think he has a big job ahead of him. And because of the breakdown of the House with the scant majority that the Republicans have right now, is this person going to be able to get the Democrats on board with some of their ideas? It remains to be seen.
Yeah, it certainly has become a bit of a poison chalice, no question. Now, what about former President Donald Trump fined for violating a gag order?
Well, I mean, look, this is par for the course for Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump does not like to follow rules. He doesn't seem to think that they apply to him. And I think the judge has been very clear with him that he would not be patient with any of Donald Trump's outbursts or attempts to malign him or any other member or officer of the court. Donald Trump has done just that. He has continually said that these proceedings are illegitimate, that somehow the judge and others are in cahoots with the prosecutor because Donald Trump is doing everything to deflect attention away from the very real charges of fraud that he is facing in this case, not to mention the other cases that he is facing in Georgia and from the federal government. So Donald Trump is in a world of hurt, but Donald Trump is the consummate showman. He knows how to use social media to his advantage and whip his followers into a frenzy. But that doesn't matter in a court proceeding. You know, the court of public opinion will not rule the day there. And I think this judge has shown Donald Trump that this is not going to end well for him if he continues to incite this particular court in this way.
Well, it seems like he's not going to stop. Doctor, how do you think this will all end? Because there are legal cases all over the place regarding the former president.
Well, who knows, right? I don't know that this is going to be a speedy road to prison for Donald Trump. Certainly, there are a lot of allegations here that he has to fight in New York, in Georgia, and with the federal government. So he'll be in Washington quite a bit. I will say, at least on the federal charges, we know that federal prosecutors don't tend to lose. They win more than 90% of the time. And if that is any kind of indicator, it is a very real possibility that Donald Trump could face prison time. He has over 91 counts, I believe, combined from all of these different cases, ranging from election interference to financial fraud. So Donald Trump is looking very likely to be an inmate one of these days. But it still is not clear whether that will disqualify him from holding office. Unfortunately, our Constitution is silent on that, and there seem to be a lot of his followers who are still happy to vote for him, despite these convictions and these very real questions around his ethics. And so we don't know what this will look like or how this will shake out, you know, for the election of 2024, which is just around the corner.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Finally, and we're run out of time. I could talk to you all day. There's so many subjects to discuss, but he spoke about getting up a wall. Obviously, that was part of getting into getting into Washington for Donald Trump. Immigration, how big an issue is it?
I think it's a huge issue. I think when we look at the ports of entry, particularly the southern border, that has become, you know, swelled, I mean, even overwhelmed with migrants right now, mainly families, which has been a change, and mainly folks from South America. Before, there were mainly folks from Central America. I think the United States is going to have to come up with a more efficient system. It has been the case that for multiple administrations, the Border Patrol Office has been understaffed, the immigration courts have been undermanned, and that has lengthened the time to hear people's claims for asylum, for regular sort of entry as long-term permanent residents. So it's a mess. And Joe Biden has, I think, asked for about $100 billion to help you know, quell some of this swell at the border. But again, it's always piecemeal, schizophrenic, and almost a little too little too late, quite frankly. This system needs a complete overhaul.
Dr. Niambi Carter, great to chat. Let's do it again soon.
Yes, thank you, Tim.